Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast with your hosts, Betsy Westhafer and Tony Bodoh. Join Betsy and Tony as they dive in with highly successful C-suite leaders who have grown successful organizations by creating a laser focus on listening to their customers and building deep customer relationships. Now, it's time to join Betsy and Tony for the Really Know Your Customer show.
Hi, I'm Tony Bodoh. Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast.
And I'm Betsy Westhafer. We're really glad you're here today.
Today, our guest is José González, and José is here because we talk about customer success in a different way than we've ever heard about it before. Usually, we're talking about tech companies and B2B sales, but we've got a different story today.
Yeah, I'm so excited to dive into this today, Tony. We're going to be talking about how you can utilize your customer support people as actual customer success people and what that looks like and why that's so important. And José has a lot of other really great insights on what it means to be customer centristic in this type of world.
So José, welcome to the show. Good to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background, kind of how you got to where you are today, maybe how you got Infolink to where it is. And let's start with that. We'll see where that takes us today.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been an entrepreneur for exactly 25 years now. It's 25 years this year. And, my journey has involved several companies that I've either founded or co-founded, but most of them have been iterations of the Infolink brand name somehow. And, we started by founding an ISP, an internet service provider, back in the late 90s. And then we spent the following decade running a software business. Really, we had our own suite of products that people use to build websites and e-commerce websites and those kinds of things. And, we spent about another decade running that business and selling our products to a worldwide market of internet consultants. And that was really our first true exposure to what it means to support customers. In that case, in many different places, sometimes different languages, and they obviously involve technical issues many times because of the nature of the product. In the late 2000s, I moved to San Jose in California, and I spent there about 7+ years. And we had also been running another small division of the company that provided outsourced services and IT support and software development. And when I got to Silicon Valley and spent a few years there inside of the startup ecosystem, two things happened for me. One is I learned a lot about the kinds of challenges that startups have to be able to scale and to be able to, stay around. And, customer support is certainly one of them. I would argue that it's one of the most important ones, actually. It may not be apparent in the first few stages, but it does become apparent later. And the other thing that happened for me is I just fell in love with the whole customer experience discipline. It made a lot of sense to me. It got me excited, not only with regards to technical products, but also, when I walked into stores and, as I played the role of a customer, as we all do for many different things, I kind of watched those things that companies did or didn't do. The marriage of those two things, customer experience, our own technology background and support background, prompted us to get into the business that we're in today. We relaunched Infolink basically as Infolink-EXP in 2012. That's what we've been doing ever since.
So José, tell us a little bit more about the specific work that you're doing with your customers and who you do that for.
So Betsy, we are a provider of customer support solutions, and we think we do that in quite a unique way for a couple of reasons. One is that we serve the technology space only. So our clients are usually consumer IoT vendors, so companies that are in the home automation space, wearables, security, those kinds of products. We also have a few customers in the software as a service space. And then, a few others that are maybe e-commerce or, fintech or companies like that. And the other thing that we do is we approach it in a way that's very much aligned with how these companies operate and how they understand their customers' journey, right? So from to onboarding, to the first 90 days in the journey, to the tech support, continuing phase renewal. So we're very much aligned with how these companies understand that and provide different services based on that understanding. That's mostly our market space and how we approach things.
So, Jose, I'd really like to dig in a little bit deeper and find out kind of tactically, how do you find out what you need to know to be in alignment with your customers?
Sure. So, different companies are at different stages, right? And for most technology companies, it kind of goes like this. They're very much focused on the engineering of their products initially, on actually creating and having a product in the first place. Then they focus on the marketing of that product because they need to let the world know that it exists and what kind of problem it solves. And then they get to the scaling part. Right. So that's kind of the progression for these kind of companies, assuming that they gain some traction with their product and are able to grow past the first few stages. Right. Then we usually talk to them when they're getting to the point where they need to scale. Right. We kind of know when we talk to a company, we know what phase it is in, more or less, and we can talk to them about their specific challenges. And the challenges usually have to do with gaining adoption of the product. So having more and more customers and scaling, right, in general. And scaling has a lot to do with scaling their operations, obviously. And we are specifically concerned with the customer support operations. So how does a company get from, having 3 or 4 people that support their first few thousand customers to a larger team that supports maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of customers, right? So that's the scaling challenge. So as they gain product adoption, they're going to face that challenge. And at that point, it's no longer so much about the product or even the marketing. It's about keeping the customers that you have, keeping those relationships in place, having a good customer experiences. The challenges are, somewhat the same across companies as go through these different phases in their lifetime.
So you talked about your experience in the tech sector, and from a B2B perspective, typically that means, the customer success model is a high touch model, and you and I've had many conversations around it. So how do you bring some of that world to this consumer-based smart product marketplace?
Yeah, excellent question, Tony. I love that question because we're not really a customer success vendor per se. We're more on the customer support side of the house, but we're very much in the customer success space in the sense that we want to try to bring that same philosophy and that set of best practices to the B2C space, right? So customer success, you probably well know, was born out of B2B companies, really, companies that can afford to, mostly in technology, we're talking about software companies. And these are companies where, you have a customer success executive that has a set of, 30 or 50 companies that he deals with. And he can afford to have a, quarterly business review with them. He can afford to give them a phone call. He can afford to have a high touch, let's say, relationship with those customers and make sure that they're getting what they need to get out of whatever solution is being sold to them. And that CSM can approach them as the renewal date approaches, and he can keep that relationship going over time. In B2C, it's not that easy, right? We're talking about many thousands of customers, sometimes in the hundreds of thousands or millions. So you can't really afford to have people call everybody on the phone. And the way you have to do it is you have to do it with lower touch approaches. So one way is to do it the tech touch way, right? You do it through email. You do it, mostly through email as customers go through different phases in the customer journey, right? So for example, if you're in the first 30 days of having bought a smart product, some sort of consumer electronics product at the store, then you're probably going to activate that product within the next, week to 2 weeks, perhaps 30 days. And you have certain challenges at that point. But as you go forward, then you're going to need less and less help, and you're going to be more interested in advanced features, for example. So one way that a company can keep up with those customers and kind of follow the customer success approach is through email and through other technical tools, the social networks, for example. But the other way that you can do that is you can do that through your agents, right? But what I mean by that is your support team, really, right? The people that are there precisely to be able to take those calls and to accompany that customer through his journey, right? So to the extent that you can do things with your support team that are closer to a customer success, to what a CSM would do, you can design certain kinds of services. For example, you can design a concierge, a white glove type service. You can You can design an onboarding service, or you can do certain things to be able to build customer success best practices, if you will, into your support operation. I think that's quite an innovative way of looking at what your support team can do for you. And that's kind of the way we see it, right? Not going to get into the whole detail right now, but that's the general idea.
I really like that, Jose, because you think about a customer, just because there are potentially hundreds of thousands or millions of customers doesn't make them any less relevant in their experience, any much less relevant in B2C than it does in B2B. It's just a different mindset for B2C. And I really love that that's your approach. And then the second part I really like about that is you have this asset, right? Your customer support people are an asset of the company. Why would you not leverage them in that way? I just think that's, just a brilliant mindset for how to better enhance the experience of B2C customers.
Exactly. I think you're absolutely right. You do have an asset. And, sometimes the way people look at support is in a break fix type mentality, right? Somebody has an issue, somebody has a problem, they call in and you fix it for them. But it turns out that if you approach it from a perspective from an understanding of what your customer journey is, and if you approach it with a customer success mindset, then, what are the services that you could design into those support operations so that the outcome is really a successful, happy customer and someone that's getting the most benefit out of the product that they acquired? And where you're building a relationship, and you're then expanding on that relationship. And, that customer is going to buy more from you also, right? And you can even have your support team be a sales team in a way, right? So you can see that agent becomes kind of a mini CSM.
Yeah.
They have kind of the same role for these many thousands of customers that a company may have.
It reminds me of a story. This was a couple of years ago. I called tech support for one of those industries where people kind of shudder at the idea of having to call tech support. And I got hold of this wonderful support person. And it turns out she was in the Philippines, and it was right after they had the hurricane. And she said to me, I just want to thank you in the United States for supporting us so much. And she was very personable and sharing some personal experience. And not that it builds a long-term relationship, but it certainly built a ton of goodwill toward the company that I was calling, because she was just being herself and very, very natural and positive, not following a script, or not to the letter, and just really engaging with me as a person calling customer support. I mean, all these years later, I still remember that, and just really made a difference in how I felt toward that company.
Absolutely. It gives you those kinds of feelings and perceptions that really create a relationship with a brand, right? And I think it has to do with the soft skills that people may have. It has to do with a mix of technical soft skills, good training, good understanding of what the solutions outcome is supposed to be, what people may be expecting from the product. Obviously, a lot of empathy and a lot of the soft skills that any service industry really should be applying.
So Jose, I'm thinking about your process there of the customer coming on board, buying the product, then onboarding, then, setting it up and needing support through the life of the product. It seems to me that there's got to be a big play for you guys in the space of analytics and understanding predictively what's going to happen next and what do we need to handle next. How do you guys handle that situation? How do you approach that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because as you know, customer success uses a lot of data, and understanding of what's going on with your customer by using data is a great asset to CSMs in B2B companies. So in our case, and in the case of B2C companies, it really should be the same. And the way we approach it is you're absolutely right. There's an analytics element to all of this, and to the extent that you can collect, analyze, and use data to optimize that customer journey, then all the better, right? So for example, the way we actually announced a product last year, a product called Zahoree, and it's exactly that, right? It's an analytics layer on top of your operations, customer support operations, I mean. And what it's going to help us do is collect data, first of all, that come from customer feedback channels. So, for example, data that comes from surveys, from the support cases themselves, and process that data to be able to, learn about what is it that the customer, not only customer sentiment, but also, to your language, Tony, on these things, right? What kind of outcome is a customer really looking for when they buy that product? It may have to do with certain aspects of self-identity and aspirational things that people are looking for. It's they're not just trying to solve a very narrow technical challenge. That product will become part of their own life, right? People for example, in IoT, there's no question. I mean, the data is out there that what people are looking for these products to do is to make their lives easier. And at the end of the day, whether a product makes my life easier or not, if I'm talking about a security product or a smart lock or a camera or a smartwatch, or, does it make my life easier or not? How much effort does it take for me to actually, become that user of high-tech products? And to the extent that you can understand these things and get them from that customer feedback, then you can feed that back, to your process and start optimizing on the things that you do. Designing services a little bit better to be more relevant to different segments of users, for example. Some people may be tech savvy, some people not so much. But also, you may even go beyond customer feedback data and add other data sources that maybe speak to the profile of that customer himself, right? What products has he bought? What accessories? What's his purchase pattern? What are his demographic data points? Where is he literally, for example? What kind of person is he? What do you know about that? As you can add these sources of data from your survey system, from your support platform, from your e-commerce platform, from your CRM perhaps even, then that data set becomes richer and richer to where you can use better intelligence to optimize the services that you're providing along that support journey.
Jose, one of the things you mentioned earlier was just about the focus and importance put on engineering. And so talk to us a little bit about the customer feedback you get from the field and how that helps evolve the products and how that feedback gets back to the engineering team, just those kinds of product improvements that actually come directly from the customers.
Sure. That's great, because as you're able to capture what your customer says to you and thinks about your product, your brand name, and so on, you can use that in different ways, right? The obvious things are that, as you provide a better customer experience, that'll translate into retention. It'll translate into expansion of those relationships. It'll translate into reputation, right? But one of the things that people don't think about many times is how it translates into product research. And one of the things that you learn from customers as well is what the product is doing and what it's not doing, and what features maybe they'd like to have in a product. And you can feed that back to your product teams, to your engineering teams. And smaller companies have a great advantage, right? They're agile. It doesn't take a long time for them to, for the director of marketing to go back to the director of product or director of engineering and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing from my customer, right? They told us that this is a feature that they actually could, would need to have, and can we put it in our roadmap? And they can do that really easily. So that's a great benefit, I think, that sometimes goes unnoticed, but that companies can certainly take advantage of.
As you were talking, Jose, it struck me, you use the term user, and what I've come to realize, like, I wear glasses, and for me, the glasses, if I don't have them on, I don't feel like myself, right? If we go back, 15 years ago, 12 years ago, smartphones coming into the marketplace, it was new and novel. Now, if we don't have our smartphone with us, we feel like we're incomplete. And so it's almost like we really moved from this phase of I'm a user in the early adoption cycle to this is part of who I am. And you said something in our prep call that got me thinking about this too, is how intense the tech revolution is going to be. It's already started, but how intense it's going to be. And you heard it to the 1980s. So take us a little bit down that path. What do you see with this world of consumer smart products and IoT opening up, and how it becomes the lifestyle that we live and who we are?
Yeah, I think there shouldn't be any question in anybody's mind that we're in the middle of a very fast, very intense technological revolution, right? I don't think it's any exaggeration to compare it to the PC revolution in the 80s. Can you really imagine a world without PCs? You can't, right? Your children can't. I mean, they're here to stay, and we really can't imagine a world before that. And I think the way, we're in the middle of that kind of wave today. IoT has been in the news for a few years now, right? The most visionary people out there saw it coming, right? If you were able to connect computers to the internet, you would have been able to connect anything to the internet at some point. And we're there, right? We're there. I mean, home automation today is probably the most dynamic space. And I include security on that, right? People want to feel safe. And a lot of the products that are being bought today are products that make us feel safer at home. Cameras, smart locks, doorbell cams, those kinds of products. But then there's a whole lot of categories that are built for other use cases, that are built for other things in our lives, right? Fitness, for example, the smartwatch that has, a fitness use first and foremost, but then health, right? And that smartwatch is turning not so much into a fitness device anymore, but into a health device that can monitor your heart rate, it can monitor your sugar levels, and can monitor some other biometrics, right? So that's just, I'm just talking about 2 or 3 different categories, right? There's all kinds of products out there for pets, right? For growing, vegetables at home, for, disposing of your garbage in a sustainable way at home. And I'm not even going into the industrial IoT space, which is a whole other world. So we're in the middle of a very, very intense technological revolution. And what that means for us is that I think the challenge is to help users. You mentioned the word user, right? Help all of us out there that are going to be users of all these technology to be able to understand it, to be able to use it adequately, to be able to use it to make our lives easier, like I said before, and to make our lives better, right? It sounds easy, but it's really not automatic, right? A lot of these products are do-it-yourself products. You're supposed to self-install them and self-configure them and so on. It's not as easy as it sounds. It never is, right? And I think Infolink, in our case, I see our mission as removing those obstacles that people have to being able to use technology better for themselves, right? So at the end of the day, it's about bridging a gap between the people that are creating all these innovative products and the rest of us out there that aren't that technical perhaps, but that can greatly benefit from all these technology.
Yeah, that reminds me of like back in the day when people first got VCRs and nobody knew how to program the clocks. Remember that was, such a big thing. It was like, I can't figure out how to program the clock. And you look how far
right.
I think we just moved past it.
Did anyone ever figure that out?
I don't think anybody figured it out. But that was really great insight. Thank you for that, Jose. As we come up on our time here, one of the things that Tony and I really like to do with our guests is ask them if they have any community service projects or charities, nonprofits that you really have an affinity for, that during this time that is just so challenging for so many people, that you could give a shout out to and just let our audience know about these organizations. So is there anybody that you work with or sit on the board for or just have a particular affinity for that you'd like to share with us?
Not specifically, but what we do is, I think that a lot of our operations are in Mexico. We have our companies based in San Jose. We have an office there, and we have some people there, mostly on our sales team. Part of our sales team is there. We do some consulting, quote unquote, from there in the early stages of engaging with clients. And then we have an office in Mexico where we do a lot of support from, and we also have an office in Spain. And one of the things that concerns me greatly is poverty, right? And so for some time now, what we have done is we have dedicated a small portion of our profits to supporting a couple of organizations that feed kids and that teach them math and art skills. These are kids that sometimes live in families where their mothers work. They may not have a father, or maybe they're basically at home on their own all day. And we mostly provide that support through church organizations that are able to provide these services to kids and keep them busy and keep them fed. And, that's very close to our hearts. That's what we do. And during the COVID pandemic, which we're in the middle of, we're also supporting some food banks to be able to share, to provide food to people that, like you've been watching in the news, right? People that when you go into lockdown, I mean, there are many, many people out there that if they don't work for a day, they don't have food to eat. They just don't have the savings. They have to work every day to make ends meet. So I think food banks in this case are doing a great job of filling that gap a little bit. And that's another thing that we're currently doing.
That's wonderful. And, there's so many heartbreaking stories in the news right now as we're enduring this pandemic, but there's so many good stories of so many people stepping up and really noticing where the need is and doing what they can to help. So we appreciate on behalf of the rest of the world for people like you that are doing good things, particularly as it relates to children.
Yeah, we all should be doing what we can. It's a big challenge. Every country has it, right? And it's a worldwide thing. And we should be doing what we can.
Absolutely. Well, Jose, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot personally about the world that you work in, and it's not a world I've been exposed to a lot. So this has been really helpful for me to understand kind of the inner workings of, the side that I'm not on, the opposite side when I call tech support or customer service. What really strikes me is just your desire to really up-level the relationship and make it more of a personal thing as much as you can when you have, hundreds of thousands of customers. So thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for your insights. And we really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure. Love your podcast. Love the title of it, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, take care, Jose. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love this interview with Jose because he really talks to that element that I think is going to be a massive, massive need in the next few years. And that is the human connection, the human relationship in the tech space for consumers, especially the IoT space. We can talk about how it's important to have human relationships in the service industry. And a lot of times people don't automatically think about technology as a service industry, but really it is. It's like the moment I buy the product, I'm now in a service sector.
Right. And, I think the whole coronavirus thing has really shone a light on the need for human connection, because I think in the past it was something that we took for granted, both personally and in business. And I think moving forward, that's going to become so much more important to people, and there'll be more of an awareness around it.
Absolutely. And it's great to see how Infolink and Jose and his team have been able to take these really best practices from the customer success space, the B2B space, and bring them into the B2C space and use that coupled with the analytics to really find ways to have that human connection. And it really comes back to, what we talk about on the show all the time. It's about really knowing your customer. Once they know the customers, once they know the obstacles on the journey, no matter if that's onboarding or tech support or it's renewal, as they know that, they can help their clients and the customers of their clients. And I love the whole approach that he takes to the business model. I think we're going to see more companies like this in the near future.
Yeah, I think he's a true visionary for being out in front on this for sure. So with that, we will wrap up today's episode of Really Know Your Customer podcast. And as always, we are so happy that you're here and encourage you to take some notes, take some actions on what you've heard here today. And we will see you next time on the Really Know Your Customer podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Really Know Your Customer. We hope you gained a lot of value from being here today. If you want to learn more about the work Betsy and Tony do to help their clients thrive, visit Betsy at thecongruitygroup.com and Tony at tonybodoh.com. See you next time on the Really Know Your Customer show.